Deep in the Peruvian rainforest lies the Manu Biosphere Reserve, one of the most
That's a little sneak peek of what's to come.
Okay. Sorry for these technical issues. Always so fun. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good morning. My name is Nancy Santillo, and I'm the founder and executive director of Rainforest Flow. And it's a grassroots. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, no problem. This is, I believe, yeah. So we are a grassroots foundation that has been working over 20 years in the Peruvian Amazon, and we're dedicated to providing integral WASH programming that's water, sanitation, hygiene, and technical training in context to the cultural and environmental needs of the people. And really what the beauty of our programming is we involve the community from the beginning, middle, and end. And throughout that process, right, developing the relationship with them, to them, within them, that they become the stewards of the project and they become the owners of the project. And so why I focused on the technical training and the health monitoring was what was lacking in international development with water and sanitation and globally. So when I was forming Rainforest Flow, I knew that we needed specific attention to make sure that the people themselves invested in their health and well-being. They invested in the technical training, so when things did go wrong, as they do, when they malfunction, that they know how to fix them. And so the really beautiful underlying energy that holds this project together is that Indigenous people have equal importance to the preservation of the rainforest, and the preservation of Indigenous people are synonymous. They go hand in hand. And for the forest to survive and for that forest to remain vibrant, for the health and well-being of our global society, that Indigenous people play a very important role in that journey. So I'm going to show you a video of our work, and I hope you enjoy it.
Deep in the Peruvian rainforest lies the Manu Biosphere Reserve, one of the most biologically diverse places on Earth. Welcome to the heart of the Amazon. It's here that Rainforest Flow brings health, clean water, and autonomy to the indigenous villages that call this rainforest refuge home. We're helping these communities build sanitary installations, health training, and now coronavirus prevention, empowering these people to be stewards of their own health, environment, and destiny. Our health and sanitation projects use natural processes that guarantee measurable health outcomes and long-term sustainability. Rainforest Flow captures water from local streams and uses gravity to guide it through a series of rock and sand filters, making the water safe to drink without the need for chemicals or pumps. We install sturdy, well-ventilated bathrooms with naturally decomposing septic units in village schools and households. We train and work with families who build the systems with us and create community sanitation committees so they can maintain their own water systems and take these skills to help other villages develop their own projects as well. We employ an international team of anthropological and medical experts to work with us to ensure our work is both culturally appropriate and scientifically grounded. Our medical team provides ongoing training and monitoring so health improvements are long-lasting and self-sustaining. The Rainforest Flow Global Teaching, Training, and Research Center hopes to replicate these projects, tested and perfected over 15 years to bring health and sanitation to indigenous peoples throughout the rainforest. Join us in helping the people of the Amazon achieve lasting health and the autonomy they deserve. These are the stewards of the health of the rainforest, which we must protect at all costs. Your generous contributions will have a direct impact on their lives and independence. Please Give today. Thank you.
Now to close that out. There we go. Okay, so today we have really the great pleasure to have Don Alberto Manquiriapa from the native village of Huacarya. And Alberto was my first contact in 1999, and we formed together, we birthed this water sanitation and health project in the community of Huacarya. So he's gonna speak in Spanish and I'll translate. ¿Quieres parar o quieres estar sentado? Okay, okay. Listo, puedes.
Ya. Bien, buenos días. No sé hablar inglés, castellano.
He'll speak in Spanish.
Bien, gracias.
It's going to be recorded to be on YouTube later and for the online people as well, so it's good to be close to the mic.
Is, okay.
Gracias a la invitación de Rainforest y la señorita Nancy Santulio, que estoy acá presente de Perú, comunidades amazónicas en el Perú. Somos un pueblo indígena de la cultura Matsigenka y Huachiperi.
Yeah. He is from the Peruvian Amazon. He said, thank you for the invitation. He is from a pueblo in the Peruvian Amazon, and his pueblo is Matsigenka and Huachiperi, ethnic groups of Matsigenka and Huachiperi.
En nuestra cultura, siempre nosotros hemos tenido mucho respeto a la naturaleza, ¿ya? Por todo ello, antes no teníamos mucho lo que es agua segura, pero gracias a, más que todo, a la señorita Nancy, hemos tenido muy contacto con personas que realmente valoran el conocimiento de lo que es importante el agua.
His culture always had much respect for nature, but they were lacking clean water. And then we came along, and what he found is that we had respect for their culture and what their needs were.
Antes nosotros no teníamos agua segura, pero primero los gobernantes en nuestro país han hecho mucho el agua, pero no era como autoconsumo humano. Había muchos problemas con nuestros niños en las escuelas, ¿no? Por todo ello, la señorita Nancy ha venido a nuestra comunidad para hacer ciertos proyectos en el año 2002.
Okay, so again, he said they did not have clean water. The projects that the government did in his community were not, I'm stuck in two languages, were not in context for what they needed. It was basically contaminated stream water piped to their homes. They had a lot of problems with the children. They were sick, right? And then we appeared, and we began to talk about how we could change that reality.
Cuando nosotros no sabíamos qué es agua segura, que puede tomar nosotros como humanos, teníamos muchos problemas con los hospitales, porque nuestros niños, muchos se enfermaban, ¿no? Entonces, que nuestros gobernantes en el Perú había muchos problemas. ¿Por qué? Porque por desconocimiento nosotros podríamos tomar el agua, o agua contaminada, ¿no? Entonces, por todo esto, al representar a la señorita Nancy por primera vez en nuestra comunidad, hemos hecho mucho elevo, digamos, para conectar con las energías del agua.
Okay. You know, their understanding of what was safe water, you know, they were drinking contaminated water. And they had a lot of problems with the local health post as well. The children were always sick. It was just a constant cycle of chronic sickness, right? And the government wasn't understanding. They couldn't bridge, you know, they couldn't bridge that connection that the people were sick and that they were drinking dirty water. When we arrived, we made it a cultural experience, and we connected to the energies of the forest. As a spiritual leader and medicine man as well, we connected to the energies of the forest and the elements of nature in order to root that peace, which was very important in their culture. Yes.
Nosotros, en nuestra comunidad, en nuestro sitio, somos pilotos de la conexión por primera vez lo que es al agua, porque cuando en el Perú no había muchas aguas de consumo humano, por primera vez nosotros en los pueblos indígenas de la cultura hemos tenido la primera vez el agua. Entonces, gracias a las organizaciones internacionales que han podido apoyar a los pueblos para salud indígena, yo he felicitado de que nosotros como humanos tenemos que tener agua segura.
Yeah. Their community was the pilot project. This is where we worked out the bugs and the falling, realizing, and getting back up. There was not a clean water project in the Amazon, in the southeastern Peruvian Amazon, if not the entire Peruvian Amazon. And so indigenous health is very important. And he's thanking the international organizations that are seeing that this is an important issue to be looked at and dealt with.
Entonces, hemos hecho muchas ceremonias para considerar que el agua debe haber en nuestros ojos del agua. Han venido muchas organizaciones internacionales para captar y firmar el proyecto para que siga viniendo algunos apoyos para poder nosotros seguir manteniendo nuestro nivel y la disciplina cultural amazónica.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. We did many ceremonies around the water, around the source of the water, that it remained vibrant, you know, and it was very beautiful. And Alberto was that leader, and the connecting the spiritual world with the physical world, and that there was a discipline. Indigenous, tú deciste disciplina indígena.
Sí, disciplina indígena.
Sí. Sí.
Ya. Entonces, nosotros como cultura hemos venido acercando, conociendo muy profundamente que en nuestra cultura existe dos espíritus en la energía del agua, masculino y femenino.
So in his culture, they have a profound belief that there's two spirits, the masculine and the feminine, exist in water.
Entonces, nosotros hemos representado como en llaveros, esto es el ojo del agua masculino.
That's that is the ojo is the spring, yeah, the spring source of the water. Yes,
Que representa
that represents
agua en el mundo,
the water in the world.
¿ya? Los mares, los océanos, los ríos
oceans.
más grandes,
The rivers, the sources, the biggest sources.
¿ya? Y esto, el nombre en la cultura se llama Xiatoto, agua, el espíritu del mundo.
El nombre is
Xiatoto.
Siatoto in his culture. It's the water of the world, el agua del mundo,
Agua en el mundo.
en el mundo.
¿Ya?
It's the water in the world.
Como lo estoy diciendo, los mares, los océanos y todos los ríos grandes es el Xiatoto.
All the largest bodies of water.
¿Ya? Y el segundo espíritu, que son ríos, ojos de agua, ¿ya?
Second
Él es
spirits are the springs and the rivers.
la femenina, lo que dice ¿no? La espíritu femenina, es los ríos.
The feminine spirit is the rivers.
Los ríos, donde corren lagos, lagunas, ojos de agua. ¿Por qué? Porque esto es por femenina, hace de que ese espíritu hace nacer los líquidos.
The feminine spirit produces the flow, right, and the movement.
¿Ya?
Yeah.
En todo el país hay ríos, ¿no? Final del río, río naciente, digamos.
El final del
Claro, los ríos, al final, donde naciente de los ríos, ¿no?
the
Naciente de los ríos, donde nace, no, ¿cómo se dice? Al final del río nace y baja hacia abajo.
right.
Sí,
That's yeah. So the
Y el nombre de esta energía se llama Mahona.
the tributaries, all the waters coming in from the large rivers and then going down into the tributaries.
¿Ya? Entonces, a través de estos espíritus, nosotros hacemos bastante lo que se llama las ceremonias del agua.
So it was from the headwaters of the river, and then the water comes down. And so he said, culturally, the ceremonies of the river, I mean, the ceremony of water was very important to integrate into the project. Las ceremonias estaban bien importantes por el proceso durante del proyecto, ¿correcto?
Exacto.
Yes. So throughout the project, it was a very important piece.
Con estas energías para nosotros es, no sé cómo se dice, hemos podido evolucionar para encontrarnos el espíritu del amor del agua, ¿no? Con las diferentes organizaciones, más que todo con Rainforest y la señorita Nancy, que por primera vez dice, Casa de los Niños Indígenas.
So it was very important for them to connect with the spirit of the water and for them to connect with us that understood the importance of that. We were first called House of the Children, and that was the metaphoric house of the child that lives within all of us. And now we're Rainforest Flow.
Entonces, para ahora, nosotros como cultura, a través de Rainforest y organizaciones internacionales, necesitamos más organización para que el agua en la Amazonía o en todas las Amazonías se mejore y se limpie nuestros espíritus para poder cuidar nuestras aguas en el mundo.
See? And now what he says is that this water needs to be brought throughout his region, throughout the Amazon, to indigenous people, so they can continue. So tú vas a seguir cuidando.
Claro, para seguir cuidando.
Yeah,
Sí.
but yeah, to continue to care for themselves and for the forest. That this has to become a priority. Yeah, estamos.
Sí.
Yeah, gracias.
Gracias.
And so next we have Kelly and Patiachi, right? Patiachi, yeah. And Kelly is a Harakmbut indigenous leader, and she participated both as a water committee member and a health promoter, and she's an indigenous leader traveling the world now, sharing her culture and the advances of the people. You want to stay, Kelly, ¿quieres levantar o quieres estar sentado?
Me quiero levantar, no.
Okay.
¿Quieres estar? No, terminas.
¿Está?
O miate, ahí anda maeni, Harakmbut, poneme, bokere, gurunda y Anpeyachi, un bachatne, manapieri, un maene, dakichi. Buenos días a todas y todos. Mi nombre es Kelly Patiachi y soy del pueblo Harakmbut. Y para mí, primeramente, quiero pedir permiso a todos los espíritus del bosque, de mis ancestros, que me permiten estar aquí, ¿no? No es fácil llegar a otros países y estar conversando con ustedes.
She said good morning, and that she wanted to ask for permission from nature, that she be here today, and that she's able to share her wisdom with you here today.
Sí, voy a contar un poco de cómo ha sido el proceso, el cambio de la vida, quizás de la vida digna que en la comunidad, ¿no? Porque no solamente hablamos de bosques, tenemos muchos bosques, conservamos la naturaleza, los bosques, pero también vivimos ahí, hay personas, hay pueblos indígenas que cuidamos el territorio, que cuidamos el agua, cuidamos los árboles, las flores, la fauna.
¿Puedes repetir esto?
Estoy diciendo que
hablas,
hablamos como nuevamente.
Está bien, disculpa.
Hablamos de bosques, la naturaleza, pero también quién cuida la naturaleza, quién cuida los bosques, somos nosotros los pueblos originarios. Y también hablar de la naturaleza es también cómo damos vida digna a los pueblos indígenas.
We can talk about the rainforest and about nature, but those who care for it are indigenous people. And how, no, que ustedes cuiden este bosque. And,
Voy a contar un poco la experiencia de cómo en mi comunidad es comunidad nativa Shintuya, pueblo Harakmbut, y cómo ha sido el proceso del cambio, ¿no? Gracias al agua.
she wants to speak of her community and what was the process when the water arrived.
Cuando era niña, nos hicieron un proyecto desde los gobiernos locales para tener un supuesto mejoramiento de agua, ¿no? Y
Yeah, when she was young, the government did a water project in her community, water and sanitation, that was supposedly supposed to bring them clean water. Yes.
Y me acuerdo que de niña, para tomar el agua, a veces cuando teníamos mucha sed de niños, salía bastantes parásitos del agua y nosotros para tomar a veces directamente lo que hacíamos era con nuestro polo ponerlo ahí, como en la pileta ahí, ponerlo ahí y tomar de ahí, ¿no? Y a veces los parásitos se quedaban en la tela. Y era normal para nosotros.
Yeah, so when this water project that came, when they opened the tap, worms would come out. And so what they would do in order to stop that is she'd get her, her t-shirt and they'd put it under the water so it would filter the water before it came out. And that's what the governmental project was.
Y entonces, nuestras mamás siempre hacían hervir el agua, me acuerdo. Pero ¿qué pasaba? También en el agua, en el pozo del reservorio, también a veces caían animales, en el bosque, como está en el bosque, animales, y eso se podrían en el reservorio y eso pasaba hasta el agua, ¿no? Pero eso hacían hervir y tomábamos así. Ya estábamos acostumbrados a eso.
Yeah, so the mothers in her village were used to boiling the water. But because the tanks were open, there were animals that would fall in and they'd rot. But that was part of their life. And they boiled the water.
Sí. Y entonces, en el año 2020, me acuerdo de que lideresas se reunieron en una asamblea comunal. Porque algunos líderes comuneros se habían ido a otras comunidades, como la comunidad de acá del maestro Alberto, y habían visto que el agua era clarita, y todos se sorprendían, ¿cómo tienen agua clarita? Decían, ¿no? Y por ahí sabían pasar la voz de que hay una ONG, Rainforest Flow, de que hace mejoramiento de agua, y que se puede el agua, como San Luis decimos nosotros, como el agua de venta, se podía tomar directamente. Y todos preocupados decíamos en esa asamblea, entonces hay que llamarlos, nosotros necesitamos esa agua. Y fue así que mediante un acta comunal se dijo de que vamos a trabajar con Rainforest Flow y hay que llamarlo, sí o sí. Y para contactar...
Okay, wait. And so of course the community leaders, heard about that Wakaria had clean water. They wanted that. Like, how could they have water that was so clear? And they wanted that too. So they searched us out, Rainforest Flow. Yeah.
Entonces, contactar a veces con la ONG, como no tenemos comunicación nosotros de internet o celular, fue un poco difícil de contactarlos, pero gracias al universo pudimos encontrar, alguien de los comuneros la encontró y le dijo, ¿sabes qué, señorita Nancy? Necesitamos que usted venga a nuestra comunidad. Y fue así que ingresó a nuestra comunidad, ¿no? Porque los proyectos siempre tienen que hacer desde las propias comunidades. Toda intervención del Estado, ONGs, tiene que ser en conjunto el trabajo entre la comunidad o pueblos originarios y la ONG.
See, it was difficult for them to get in touch with us, right? Because at the time the internet was it was lacking. There wasn't a lot of communication, and then we made contact, and and we began the process. And what was really important, it had to be born from them as well, ¿no? Nacido dentro de ustedes y nosotros. No estaba nosotros, right? Yeah.
Y entonces se hizo la obra, ¿no? Y todos sorprendidos porque de una vez el proceso trabajamos mujeres también, ahí nos reunimos mujeres para traer lo que nos pedía para hacer el filtro, porque se hace con piedras, arenas, y nosotros traíamos, bien felices nosotras, ¿no? Trabajamos más que todo mujeres, señorita Nancy, me acuerdo.
Yeah. She said, they started the process and all the women were involved because we collect rock and sand to make the filters. And so all the women were happily in the riverbanks, no?
Sí, sí.
Gathering the material together.
Y al poco tiempo, cuando se terminó la obra, vimos que el agua era buena. Entonces, ahí fue que yo le dije a la señorita Nancy, te puedo ayudar a monitorear, ¿no? Porque antes teníamos problemas de diarreas, enfermedades de la piel, y queríamos hacer una evaluación, el antes y el después. Entonces es por eso que yo semanalmente monitoreaba las casas, las familias, y decirles cómo les está yendo, si están teniendo problemas de la piel, enfermedades de diarrea a los niños, cómo lo ven el agua, y así ha habido un proceso de mejoramiento, ¿no? Veíamos que el agua era limpia y se podía tomar directamente.
Okay, so once the water was clean, when she worked as a committee member, then she wanted to monitor health because they wanted to show before and after. How did they progress? ¿No? Tu progres, ¿cómo es el cambio en el agua? Yeah, and so she was in charge of going to the houses and monitoring them to show the results. And that water was good. As she said, the water was clean.
Y también eso facilitó en las tareas en el hogar, ¿no? Porque al tomar directamente ya no hacíamos hervir el agua. Y como que eso nos ayudó a reducir la utilización de lo que cocinábamos a leña, utilizábamos menos leña. Entonces facilitó también el trabajo de las mujeres más que todo. Porque quien trae la leña a la casa para cocinar es la mujer.
Yeah, so that they no longer had to boil the water, so they used less wood, to have to heat up the water. And that was even better because the women had to go collect the wood in order to make the fire to boil the water. So it was less work for the women.
Entonces, estuvimos un tiempo así hasta que se enteraron en la municipalidad, que es un gobierno local que monitorea el estado de agua. Y qué coincidencia, justo cuando estábamos mejorando nuestro agua, entra la municipalidad diciendo, ¿qué está pasando aquí? ¿Quién ha intervenido acá? Y nos dijeron, ¿no? Tuvimos problemas cuando nos dijeron de que esta ONG las está engañando, de que no pueden permitir cómo van a tomar agua directamente y sin cloro, cuando antes ni siquiera ni cloro venía a dar. Entonces ese problema tuvimos y hasta ahora.
Yeah, so once they were in movement, they were doing well, and the municipal came in. It's like, who's this nonprofit? And they're here to, engañar means they're here to take advantage of you. And you have to put in chloro. You have to put in chlorine, high levels of chlorine. And so they begun a process of trying to keep them down instead of letting them flourish. And they continue to bother them to this day.
Y en la asamblea comunal yo también dije de que no puede ser posible que no nos esté engañando, porque yo misma estoy monitoreando. Yo misma estoy en el proceso de tomar pruebas del agua y de la boca toma, de diferentes puntos, y tenía un pequeño laboratorio y se veía, ¿no? Si había parásitos, yo misma pude ver, y yo decía eso.
She said to the municipal, they're not taking advantage of I myself am doing the water testing. I see the results. The water is pura, it's clean.
Y entonces pasó el alcalde, hasta el alcalde vino, de lo que nunca vino el alcalde vino, y en un momento donde cuando no estuvimos, había dado encargado a un joven diciéndole que ponga este cloro. Y a veces como jóvenes, hay jóvenes que no participan en las asambleas comunales. A veces como jóvenes dejamos de lado los problemas de la comunidad. ¿Y qué pasó? Este joven agarró, le habían dado un litro de cloro para que pueda poner en el reservorio. Y lo había puesto y malogró el sistema, ¿no? Y salió agua, me acuerdo, bien fuerte el cloro. Y la gente tomó eso y estaba con diarrea, mucha gente, muchos comuneros. Y pero hubo problemas en la comunidad también.
Okay, so the municipal convinced one of the young boys in the community, one of the young men, to put chlorine in their system. And it wrecked the whole system because it was slow sand filtration in the system. It wrecked everything. Everybody started getting diarrhea. There was such high levels of chlorine in the system. And so there's that disconnect. So estamos en el tiempo que eso puede terminar, ahora tiene que...
Sí.
Yeah, okay.
Sí, entonces lo que estamos haciendo es que pidiendo que se actualicen las políticas de la municipalidad con la direza más que todo, ¿no? para que ellos se basan que hay una ley donde se tiene que hacer cloración cada cierto tiempo el agua, pero no toman en cuenta o no han hecho investigación desde la municipalidad mismo si esa agua es segura. O sea, ellos se dejan llevar porque es una ONG y que son, más que todo, son enemigos no quieren ver progreso en las comunidades, ¿no? Pues los quieren tener ahí como animalitos, que somos uno más, que no tenemos derecho a tener una vida digna, una salud digna, agua clara, agua buena, ¿no?
Yeah, she's saying that, you know, there needs to be a communication between the municipals and the health ministries, that they come to an agreement that their waters are purified, they're pre-treated. And she says they often treat us like we're animals, like there's nothing, you know, they don't care about us. They put high levels of chlorine, right, in the system, and then it makes them sick. So there has to be a political, she's saying, there has to be new laws or new regulations in which protect them, ¿no? Proteger ustedes, ya. Okay, ese es el final. Ya.
Un poquito.
Ya, ajá.
Sí, entonces con los profesionales de Rainforest Flow estamos llevando este tema y estamos de alguna manera articular ¿no? Para que echen un poquito de exploración, no sé, algo, pero que nos dejen trabajar con el agua que tenemos. Tenemos un buen agua y también a la par creo que nos ha unido bastante el tener agua sana. En los últimos tiempos hemos visto que hay un cambio climático bien fuerte, el agua está reduciendo y como tenemos agua sana, hemos visto que es necesario también hacer algo por parte de nosotros, ¿no? Y como mujeres también estamos reforestando para justamente en el futuro captar más agua y que no se reduzca como se está reduciendo hasta el momento.
Beautiful. So now that they have clean water, they're really united, and the women of the community are very united, and and because of the climate changes and the reduction in the water flow throughout, we can say, the southeastern Peruvian Amazon, throughout the world, that their reforestation, their annual reforestation project, so they can protect their waters. Yeah.
Gracias. Dakichi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dakachi is thank you. Yes. Okay, so now we have Malva, but, oh, here she is. Okay, one moment. Maggie, how do we need to get, hi Malva, 1 minute, I just need to get you on screen. How do I get this cursor back to us here? Here's Malva. We just need to bring it over to the screen.
Where's the cursor?
I know, the cursor's up there.
Where did it go?
Escape.
Hit space?
Escape.
Escape.
Waters are strong, so your computers are still a little tricky for us.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be there, but
Can we go? Can we
okay,
do
yeah,
that?
do it.
Okay, now how do we make it? Let's get this
Get this
cursor.
off.
Put the cursor over her and
Drag her
double
over.
click or double down.
Over there? It's hard to see.
No, you're
We can't see. Sorry, a little technical difficulties.
I can't see it. Chad, where's the cursor? No, but here we go. Alive?
oh, you can't see it. Right there.
Yeah. There we go.
It has to be pulled over.
So it has to be pulled over that way.
I don't know.
Can you?
Which way do you want it?
We want it on the screen. It's got to be pulled over that way. Hold on, Malva. Malva, I think you can unmute.
No. Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. We're just trying to get you up on the screen, Malva.
Let me just call to
Okay.
Okay. But I think Glenn is first, no?
No, you are first. We changed the order. We're having you come in first.
Okay. And but I will share the presentation.
Okay, one moment. So we're going to have you, are they hopping in?
Can you see?
It's what, we're getting technical support right now. Hold on, we're coming in. We need this presentation. On the screen. 1 second, Malva, we'll be right with you.
She?
Yeah, that's it.
Do you need the slides on the screen as well?
Yeah. we need the presentation on the screen. I'd like you to see it. There we go.
In her small window.
I've got it here. I'll just share it. And Malv, if you could tell me when to advance the slides, because I've already got it up. That might be easier.
Wait, hold on, Glenn, we've got tech support right here. We're on.
I managed to share it. She sent it to me and I'm sharing it now. So if that's easier, we could just do that. And she could just tell me when to go through the slides. That might be faster since it's
Okay,
already up there.
We're online now. So
Let me check that it's. Can they see it?
can you see it, Malva and Glenn? Can you see the
Yeah.
Presentation?
Oh, good.
Malva, I think you can unmute. No, she's stuck.
Okay.
Can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you
Yeah.
can.
So just tell me. I'm sharing now, Malva. So you just tell me when to go forward. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Malva, let me give you a little introduction. This is Malva Baskovic. She is the Senior Water Supply and Sanitation Specialist, World Bank Water Global Practices, and World Bank WASH Rural Initiatives. And she's going to be speaking on an overview of Amazon challenges. Okay, Malva.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation, and sorry to not be there. I'm based in Peru. I'm part of the global water practice. I work for the Latin American and the Caribbean region, and basically, I want to share with you some thoughts, information that we have regarding the rural sector, specifically for the water supply, sanitation, and hygiene, and a quick overview of what are the challenges, specific challenges in the Amazon. The next, please. Well, the first that I need to say is that definitely climate change is exacerbating the water global crisis, and it's definitely urgent to take attention of multidimensional challenges if we want to achieve the SDGs. The first message is that we have too much water. The climate change is increasing intense rainfall, leading to flood events, soil erosion, crop damage. 1.8 billion people, it means 23% of the world's population face significant flood risks, and flooding has caused over $313 billion in economic losses globally since 2015. Also, there are too little water. It means that 1.2 billion people worldwide affected by water shortages, and food demand is expected to rise by 60% by 2050. Dry shocks reduce agricultural productivity in around 7 to 14%, and 2.2 billion around the world lack access to safely managed drinking water. And women and girls are responsible for fetching water in 7 of 10 households without supplies on premises. And the last message is there are too polluted water. Globally, only 50% of wastewater is collected or treated. 3.6 billion people lack access to safely managed sanitation, and 41% drop in neonatal fatality due to hand washing. Freshwater worldwide population have declined 83% since 1970. The next, please. And this situation is even more critical in the rural sector, which definitely need to be prioritized if we want to achieve universal access by 2030. The first is that the coverage has been increased in the last years, but it definitely remain very low. 8 of 10 people still lack access to basic water supply services. 92% of the worldwide population practicing open defecation, and only 60% of the rural population have access to basic services. If we want to achieve universal access, we will require increasing 4 times the current rate of progress. The next, please. The rural area, I think, is not a new for any of the present faces into multidimensional challenges. It's not about just the water, it's about the extreme poverty, the vulnerability to climate change and shocks, conflicts and violence, displacement, burden of disease, and among others. Around 2 of 3 people living in extreme poverty live in rural settings. The next, please. And it has not been a priority for governments. It has not been in the national budgets during the last years. Mostly of the financing and support that has been received in the rural areas mainly came from donors. And it's definitely necessary to take attention into a holistic approach. We need appropriate and context-specific technologies, put attentions on beyond the households. It means on the schools, healthcare facilities, and other institutions that require basic wash services, and take attention also on the attitudes and practices, specifically on hygiene. The next, please. The case of Latin America is not different. However, I would like to highlight some important changes and improvements in the last years, over the decades. One, and I think it's important, is that the physical distance between urban and rural areas has been reduced, and virtually connectivity has increased. It has created new relationships between urban and rural areas and emerging new cultural patterns that I think it's important to understand. For example, there are changes in sanitation service level patterns in terms of what the people are looking for. The next, please. The second is that the rapid urbanization has improved and sustained economic growth, and this has changed the rural environment. For example, in Latin America, less than 40% of families depend on agricultural economies that are living in the rural areas. And I think it creates a new context that we need to understand. And changes in weather that we have been highlighted at the beginning definitely has affected the water sources and also the water infrastructure. But at the same time, there are a new trend in the population and in the civil society regarding the protection of the water sources. And I think it is also important to understand new approaches that has been emerged, such as the water resource management, the river basin planning, the circular economy. There are approaches in many countries related to compensation or payment for environmental services that I think are interesting trends that we also need to take into account. The next, please. But Latin America also faces probably the same problems that are affecting worldwide. and the same challenges. One is the lack of sustainability of chimps and providers. It occurs in every country of Latin America. There is a need to think on how we can improve decentralized approaches and multi-sector intervention in the territory. It's something that is very hard to drive in the national governments. The next, and also there is a lack of policies, and I think it's an important point, the lack of policies, and we heard the testimony of the two Indigenous colleagues first, and I think it is important to understand how we can handle the WASH subsector in the rural area. And the need to strong institutions and specific regulations is one of the remain actions that the governments should take. And finally, the need to understand the behavior part. We work a lot on the infrastructure part, but put less attention on the sustainability of the behavior. It is important to work on social interventions to promote changes in sanitation and hygiene behaviors. And probably the experience of Nancy and the team is very clear about how it's not about infrastructure, it's about how we can create these conditions and sustain those behaviors throughout the time. And then next, please. And what happened in the Amazon specifically? Well, the Amazon is definitely affected also by the climate change, and probably something interesting that I wanted to highlight here is that there are more frequent and intense droughts that are testing the Amazon's resilience, and has evidence that during the last years, these droughts disrupt ecosystems and has been created a hard situation in the Amazon, specifically in terms of affecting people who rely on rivers for transport, food, and income, and definitely the most vulnerable people. And these droughts has been stretched by deforestation. Around 1/5 of the rainforest has been lost over the last 50 years. And rapid deforestation has left the Amazon more vulnerable to weather extremes. And well, one trigger condition is some climatic phenomena like El Niño, but human-caused climate change was the main driver of the extreme drought, according to the World Weather Attribution Group. The next piece. We did a water security diagnostic study in Peru, and we found that the people of the Amazon rainforest region share the most of the burden disease associated with improved wash services. For example, the burden associated with improved wash in the Amazon records double the number of deaths related to inadequate services with other regions, 14.3 deaths per million compared with 7.4 deaths in the coast, and double the number of years lost due to disability linked to wash-related diseases. And the coverage and quality of wash services is diverse in the country. However, the most important challenges remain in the rural areas, where 60% hasn't access to sanitation, to wash services, and almost half of them are indigenous populations, located mostly in the Andes and the Amazon, and 39% of Amazon population considered poor. Between 2001 and 2017, Peru lost about 2.1 million hectares of Amazon rainforest due to agricultural expansion. And there is a lot to do in terms of forestry, in terms of the impact of these kind of things. For instance, around 50% or the half of greenhouse gas emissions is about this situation, and we need to work on and put attention on that. And finally, the last, please. I wanted to share some thoughts on what are the key pillars in which we need to continue working on. Definitely, the rural is the piece of the puzzle that must be solved to tackle SDGs, and definitely the time to act is now. And one pillar is work on the governance of the rural sector. We need to better understand how to overcome the constraints related to the political economy, to the capacity, to the incentives and behaviors in this region, especially in the Amazon region. And we require also national monitoring and data frameworks. There are a lot of gaps in terms of information. And if you don't measure the situation, it is less probably that you can change this situation, because you need to understand what is happening and you need to be aware and have a clear understanding on how to act, and this based on good quality and good data. The second is that we need to do business as an unusual approach. If we continue doing business as usual, probably we will continue having the same results. And it is for that purpose, it is important to go beyond the current infrastructure projects. We need to have projects that includes resilience, that be inclusive, that put attention on sustainability and focus on scale if you want to achieve universal access. We also put attention on strength, data collection, management and analysis, and how to provide technical support, specifically or with more emphasis on climate-related aspects. The third pillar is innovation and financing. There is important to find ways of increasing financing to the sector, but also to improve the existing funding that is allocated and how we can maximize those resources. And also to prioritize the rural wash subsector in government planning. It is not the case in many of the countries of Latin America where the rural is not prioritized by governments, and exploring how we can remove barriers regarding water quality, regarding political influence or collection of tariff settings, for example. And finally, an holistic approach. Definitely that the rural wash sector need to work without silos. That is the current condition. Need to break down these silos and work with other sectors like agriculture, health, environment. Understand broader the water uses, including irrigation, agriculture, and livestock production. Watershed approaches and territorial interventions is part of the recommendations, and also work on improving platforms and partnerships to work together and definitely tackle this situation and act now as in a collective manner to achieve the very important challenge that we face in achieving universal access. Thank you very much. I'm happy here to answer a question if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malva. Now we have Dr. Glenn Shepard, who has been with the project since its conception, and he's a visiting professor at Princeton University. He is our anthropology director, and Rainforest Flow's health. He's going to present Rainforest Flow's health and social impact of WASH implementation in indigenous communities of the Peruvian Amazon. He is an indigenous expert and speaks fluent Matsigenka as well. Go ahead, Glenn. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah, we
Great.
hear you. Great.
So I've been working with Rainforest Flow since 2003. I've been working in the Amazon for almost 40 years, but with Rainforest Flow for half that time, and helping to implement these water projects starting out in Wakaria village, with Don Alberto talked about, and then expanding as the project has succeeded, expanding to multiple villages throughout Manu Biosphere Reserve, and then more recently in Loreto in northern Peru. I'm an ethnobotanist and medical anthropologist, and I first went to the Amazon to study traditional medicine, medicinal plants, and shamanism. And of course, indigenous peoples have a very rich medical tradition. They have lots of plants that work for some illnesses. But what I noticed is that because of the population concentration around schools and government health posts, the local health capacities were being overwhelmed. And there's this proliferation of parasites in the water and the soils, and lots of intestinal parasites, high rates of malnutrition, especially among children, and lots of diarrhea. And as both Alberto and Kelly mentioned, the government projects that have been installed in the region have failed because of lack of good engineering, negligence, no training of local people. They just sort of build and abandon. And there's just all these wasted investments, unfortunately, littered about in the Amazon. And so for WASH projects to seed, they need to have community involvement. They need to be driven by communities, and they need to be fine-tuned to the social environmental context. So as an anthropologist, my task with Rainforest Flow has been to, I speak some of the local languages, I know the communities, and how do you translate these interventions in a way that local people can understand and adapt? Right? And so, the technology itself is a very simple technology. It's slow sand filtration, using where possible local materials, local sand, local rocks for construction and for filtration. And because the community is involved in gathering many of these materials and installing them from the get-go, they understand the workings of the system, different from a system that's being built by a bunch of engineers from the city who just build a system and go away, and the people don't participate in it. And so, one of the key things of this technology in some of the more remote communities is using these geomembrane tanks, which are portable. Each tank weighs 23 kilos or so. The whole filtration kit for a community of 200-300 people weighs less than 200 kilos. And once you get the water source stabilized and identified, you can literally install a filter in a matter of a week, compared with 20 tons of cement and rebar and more than 6 months of construction time for the typical structures that the Peruvian government builds. And at the same time, the importance of training the committee so that they can manage these projects. You can't have water without sanitation. You can't have sanitation without water. So together with the clean water projects, that water is used to create bathrooms, starting out at the schools to get children used to the bathrooms, using biodigesters, eco-friendly waste management systems. And then as the communities develop and require better sanitation services, some communities have adopted individual household toilets. In order for the WASH to work, you need to have hygiene education. And we do this by working with the local healthcare workers and the school teachers to do these health and hygiene classes for children, for mothers, for families, so that these changes last beyond just the interventions of the project itself, and that these become social changes that are sustainable in the society and become part of the daily routine of school children going to school and washing their hands. As Don Alberto mentioned, the spiritual dimension of local values is also very important. Don Alberto has done ceremonies to guarantee that the water sources don't dry up. We've worked with local artists, who have taken indigenous mythology, and in the case where there are existing government concrete structures that had to be rebuilt, painting indigenous myths about water and about biodiversity onto these structures with children to valorize indigenous culture. And through this whole process, participation, using local materials, adapting the shapes and the forms of the infrastructure. We started out with these sort of heavy traditional aluminum sinks. We realized that you could save a lot of materials and time and make a more practical structure using these sort of robust tap stands, working with women home to home, not just in school meetings, but with in-home meetings on nutrition, on hygiene, and then the local water committees organize themselves to define what every household has to pay a small fee that the community decides that goes directly to the water committee, so they have funds to buy materials and maintain the systems. And as Kelly mentioned, because of this empowerment and this training and this know-how, they understand the system, they manage the system. When government officials come in and give them information that's wrong, or they want to change something, want to dump a bunch of chlorine into the system, local people are learning to push back against sometimes corrupt and incompetent advice that's coming from municipal governments that haven't, they get elected into office. There's a system that exists, and they come in and they want to change things, and people are learning. In the past, they've accepted anything the municipal governments give them because there's this great need. But now they've seen how a system works, and that they sometimes need to push back against the local authorities when they're giving advice that's not of use to them, or that's going to damage their system. And so one of the cornerstones of our work has been to, first you do a baseline study of what is the health situation, parasite monitoring, anemia, hemoglobin levels, nutritional status, and then once you determine the parasites, then through using local healthcare workers, we make sure that parasite medications are distributed according to the ministry guidelines. The Peruvian Health Ministry has guidelines for parasite medications on a regular basis, but they aren't always followed by local healthcare workers. And then ongoing health and social impact assessments, so you can manage the outcomes. And one of the great innovations that we've had was using, rather than having to take all the water samples into to the city to be analyzed in a laboratory, we now have this portable laboratory donated by Hash Company, and you can incubate and process the water samples in situ, and you can actually show people what water contamination looks like. They can see the bacteria, they can smell the bacteria. Indigenous water committee members know how to run the water samples, and then you can show how the water samples through filtration become healthier. Using slow sand filtration, we're getting up to 99.9% disinfection of the water. You can see it in these dishes where you're getting the water that's coming into the system, which is the kind of water they used to drink, has hundreds, if not thousands, of coliform bacteria, fecal coliforms. The first stage of filtration through rock filters reduces it by a 40–50%, and then coming out of slow sand filters, not necessarily without the need of chlorine, we can get 99.9% disinfection. And in one of the communities that had a really serious problem, almost 30% Giardia rates when we arrived, that's now been reduced by 97% after 11 years of intervention. You can see on the left and the right the water that the people at Luis Terry village used to drink, full of sediments and bacteria, and now they're drinking clean water straight from the tap. In Luis Terry village, we had a 93% reduction in monthly monitoring of diarrhea over the first 12 months of the intervention. And so the plan is to take this technology, we've piloted it in 4 communities in Manu, a 5th community in northern Peru. And the plan is to expand to create a regional wash model that would be, in about 10 communities in Manu Biosphere Reserve, 1,200 indigenous peoples, and to help indigenous peoples be better stewards to, 2.2 million hectares of rainforest in the Manu region and the adjacent Lower Urubamba region, where there's 12,000 people in more than 30 communities. And by bringing WASH, as Kelly said in the beginning, people with indigenous communities, all the projects are funding, climate change, and they're funding forest projects, but they aren't looking at the health of indigenous peoples. And by expanding, multiplying this impact, we could sort of consolidate healthy indigenous peoples being stewards of over 10 million hectares of rainforest between the Manu Biosphere Reserve and the Camisea Basin. And that's, I sped things up a little bit so that we can stay on time. I hope we have time for questions at the end, and you can always check out the Rainforest Flow website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. That was fabulous. Fabulous. Okay, next we have the great honor to have Dr. Chad Javert here, and the environmental engineer and professor at Purdue University. How do we get you?
I have no idea how we do this.
Where's our, do you have any idea? How do we get you back up on the screen? Let's see there. We want his PowerPoint up on screen now. Do we have a escape? There we go. There we go. Thank you. Okay, Chad.
Started?
Yeah.
Can you,
Where's the cursor? Oh, there it is.
there it is. It's down here. You gotta go up.
I'm just trying to put it on full screen.
Oh, great. There you go.
And then just press enter.
Or this,
Yeah, I think so.
either way, I'll figure it out. I would like to take credit for designing these, but I didn't design these systems. Humphrey Blackburn worked with Rainforest Flow for a long time, and I came in about 2 years ago, basically to help troubleshoot these things. And they're great systems. Nancy found out that I was working with slow sand filters in some rural schools in Kenya, so she called me up one day with a whole bunch of questions, and we took it from there. So I'll go through this fast because a lot of this information has already been stated, but Rainforest Flow has been working in several communities in 2 areas, mostly in southern Peru, but also at Luis Terry, which is in the northern portion of the country. The typical design of these plants is gravity-fed pipes, and finding a source zone above where the village is one of the key issues here, because everything is gravity fed. So in this case, it's a spring fed zone. Sometimes it's an infiltration basin next to a river where they put gravel above a pipe, perforated pipe, and then it flows by gravity down. The gravel pre-filters are upflow filters. The slow sand filters are downflow filters. They do add chlorine, but minimal amounts. And then they have water storage tanks. And in the case of Luis Terry, they actually have an elevated reservoir, so they pump it up with solar power. So getting the water from the source zone to the village is through PVC pipe. So one of the things to stress with these is this is hard labor, hard work to install these systems, and you have the locals doing it. So that basically makes it their system too. This is a picture of one of the systems. This is one of the gravel filters. There's another one next to it. The 3 slow sand filters, and then a storage tank. Note, as Glenn said, these are geotextile membrane filters, so you can basically fold them up and take them in on a backpack. This is looking at the same system from the other end with the storage tank here. So you can sample along this treatment system for different parameters, microbiology content and things like that. Dimensions, the typical tank, these are the larger tanks that they make, but they've had some smaller tanks too. Height is about 1.5 meters. The sand volume is about 2.6 meters. Pore volume, that gives you a pore volume of about 1.3 meters, which is important because the water needs to stay in the filter for a while to be treated, because these are biological processes. The microorganisms that are attached to the sand are basically digesting the organic carbon that is coming in, either solid organic carbon or dissolved organic carbon. So the amount of organic carbon leaving the filter is very, very close to zero. Because if you're going to chlorinate, you can't chlorinate a highly organic water. And that's why they often over-chlorinate, because they've got too much organic carbon in the water. So you have to remove both the dissolved and particulate organic carbon for these systems to be effective. This is the top of one of the pre-filters. So you can see even the water coming out of the pre-filter is fairly clean and low turbidity. In the US, the turbidity limit on drinking water is 1 NTU. In some developing countries, it's as high as 5 NTU. In the case of Lewis Terry, they do pump the water up the hill, which means they take it, and this is the water you can see that's pumped up. They have solar panels that operate basically a pump that's like a groundwater pump, basically, so that it gets distributed then to the community. Chlorination, they do chlorinate. This is a drip chlorination system, so there's a large storage tank that contains about 400 milligrams per liter as Cl2. They chlorinate with calcium hypochlorite. They dilute that about 1 to 350 into the water. To keep it, it's a drip chlorinator, which means you control it with a valve. They control the flow with a valve, but this small tank has a little float in it, so you have almost a constant head. It only goes up a few inches, which means now you have a constant pressure head feeding that water, that chlorine solution into the water that's coming out of the slow sand filters, so that you have a constant chlorine if you have a constant flow, and they work under constant flow conditions. And again, the infrastructure is really nice. And I'll just flip through some of these because Glenn also showed you some of these. But sanitation, it's not just water treatment, but sanitation is also important with different types of digesters outside of the toilets and showers. And also, in one case, they have a large Imhoff tank. And then from these tanks, they also have drainage tubes that go out, that drain the water out into the field. Again, here's another pipe that's being laid. It is labor intensive to do this, but once you have the system, you do have to maintain it. You have to maintain the chlorine on a weekly basis. They monitor the chlorine daily to make sure it's not too high or too low. And they also have to rake the slow sand filters off of the top to get rid of the most of the suspended solids that fall on it, so that the filters don't get clogged. And with that, I think I'll end. So chlorine, Rainforest Flow comes in and monitors coliform bacteria, E. coli, turbidity, pH, metals. They send samples off to government or laboratories to report heavy metals and other things. And basically, water does not violate local Peruvian water quality standards, or for that matter, U.S. water quality standards. And it looks good, and it tastes good. And getting to some of these villages is somewhat difficult. The roads are not always the best, and in some cases it's by boat. So they are very remote. And when I see myself, it's time to stop.
Great, thank you, Chad. And now we have the honor of having Samuel Schwan with us, and he is here to speak on water and philanthropy, a donor's perspective.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yes.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I am certainly the least qualified person to speak here at this table. You've heard the experts, Chad, Glenn, the indigenous perspective of Kelly, Alberto, and of course the founder's vision of Nancy. But I just want to give a perspective of why I invest in water, and I'm sure a lot of you have an idea of the great things that water brings. One, it just provides a catalyst to expound on a life that people have always envisioned for themselves, but they weren't quite sure that they could reach, because there's health factors that are always pulling them back from an education that they want, pulling them back from work opportunities that they want. Before I was given the opportunity to be a philanthropist, I was a paramedic by trade. The job of a paramedic is very simple. You show up, you assess the situation, and introduce a benefit, medication, anything that you can do to try to make this situation a little bit better in the most simple way possible. When I first visited the Amazon, I saw lots of issues going on. There is a lack of education, again, lack of job training, lots of issues, but all I kept hearing, the main problem was our water is bad, so it prevents us from living the life that we want to have. Okay, we went down the road of who's gonna help bring clean water to these people. I fortunately found Nancy with Rainforest Flow, and I saw right away that she had a solution to this issue, and it wasn't just the process that Chad and Glenn kind of walked you through of how the filtration system works, but most importantly it was the community involvement that empowers people to say, okay, I have an issue in my life, but for the first time I can do something about it. It's not with intervention of a government agency or a large nonprofit, but it's something that I can do, a situation that I can get a hold of. So they bring clean water to themselves. Most importantly, that they strengthen this inner spirit, the spirit that says, I can go and have the life that I want to live, the life that I want for my children to have, the life that is going to better my people. So it's been a great honor to be involved with Rainforest Flow. I just want to say thank you to Nancy for including me on this journey. I want to say thank you to all of you for hearing us out today. So I'm going to end short and sweet, and if you have any questions for us, please, we'd love to hear them. Thank you all.
Okay, so do we have any questions? Go ahead.
I was just wondering the difference between the chlorination by the government and why that caused health issues versus chlorination after the sand filtering and why that was more effective.
Chad?
I'm actually not quite sure what the government was doing, but for example, when we came in, one of the systems, they were having problems with chlorination. In the rainforest, you can't use sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach basically. It's very, very dilute. You dilute it way down. It's basically the same thing that you're drinking in your water because it's sodium hypochlorite. In the rainforest, you have to use calcium hypochlorite. Calcium hypochlorite usually is sold as a solid, but you can make a dissolution of it. And the problem with the way they were initially doing it was their stock solution was too concentrated. They wanted it to last for like 2 weeks. But the problem is with calcium hypochlorite, if you make the stock solution too big, you got lots of calcium in there. You got hypochlorite, which is a base, which means the CO2 from the atmosphere comes in, which means it's basic, and now that CO2 becomes carbonic acid, which becomes carbonate. Got calcium and carbonate, it precipitates and clogs the chlorinator. So you have all sorts of issues that we don't have in the US just because using bleach in the Amazon is illegal. So you have, it's amazing because you want to always go and do what is typical in your home country, but you can't always do it that way. You have to, you know, follow the local rules and everything else and find out ways to make it work. So when I got involved, the one thing is, well, just use a lower stock concentration and you won't get the calcium carbonate precipitating out. I think it's calcium carbonate, but it'll work. You just use a lower dose, increase the flow rate by twice, you get the same chlorine dose, and you don't have to over-chlorinate then either. So, and measuring, you have to measure the chlorine at the tap to make sure it's sufficient. You have to measure the tap in the storage tank and things like that. So monitoring chlorine is critical. And right now in developing countries, we don't have cheap enough ways to monitor chlorine. The hot kits work, but they still cost, you know, more than they should for a basic way to test for chlorine.
Right. And might I add, the problem that we've faced over 20 years with governmental, municipal chlorination systems is they're very low technology, they don't work, they have a standard of chlorine of treating, what is it, 1.5, it's 1.5, what it, milligram,
Milligrams per liter as CO2.
yeah. And so what happens is it's just blasting the systems, and so what happens is all the chlorine goes in the first 6 hours, and the rest of the day, or the rest of the time, that there isn't any chlorine in the system. Or when they come to do the water test, they chlorinate the water, and then the water after that day is no longer chlorinated. So it's basically technology that's not working, and that's one of our partnership goals with Chad and Purdue. We are now working on a chlorination system for the Amazon that works. And that's a really exciting thing for us. Anyone else? Yes?
I'm Maureen Fuller with Operation Blessing. We have 2 offices in Peru, in Puno and Iquitos. And I hear that you're having a lot of issues with the municipalities, us too. There's a lot of disconnect. But I was wondering how you think you can foster a better relationship with them, both in an NGO perspective, but also locally. So, les escucho que han tenido muchos problemas con las municipalidades. Nosotros también tenemos una oficina en Puno y en Iquitos. En Puno tenemos buenas relaciones con la municipalidad, pero en Iquitos no. Y pregunto, ¿tienen ideas cómo podemos tener tener más apoyo de la municipalidad? ¿Cómo podemos comunicarnos con ellos para ayudar en proyectos así, para tener como una buena relación con ellos?
¿Tiene idea?
Yo puedo decir.
Sí, absolutamente.
Sí, creo que en las comunidades amazónicas hay más problemas, ¿no?, que en la zona andina. Y creo que lo que falta es actualizar las políticas de la direza. Entonces, si se hace incidencia desde arriba en que las políticas se tienen que actualizar y cosas así, yo creo que puede haber mejores proyectos sin echar mucha cloración como se ha venido haciendo, ¿no? Y porque se ha demostrado en este sistema que se está manejando es muy bueno. Entonces eso falta, hacer incidencia en los altos niveles tal vez.
Do you want to translate that now? Okay. It's better communication, and it's really establishing a standard that understands that they have pre-filtration in their water. And it's more education for the local municipals, ¿no? Para educar ellos de lo que ustedes tienen. And the thing that I can say is, I never lose hope with municipals because you have to build relationship. But the problem is they turn over so often, and they're very apegado, ¿no?, de la ley. They're stuck to a way that's their laws that are out of context when there are water systems that have pre and slow sand filtration. There's no need. I mean, our water's leaving the system 99.99% clean, 98%. There's no need to put that kind of chlorine in a system. So what we say is, how do you begin to better the relationship? Through meetings with the indigenous, through the NGO and the municipal, and it's long term. Okay, because you have to begin to open them to new, as she says, the Deresa is the regional health ministry. You have to change, you have to work both from the down up and the top down, but it's more about education, really, for Amazonian communities. And really, we're probably 5 communities, and we're probably the only, some of the few projects that are using pre-filtration and slow sand filtration that works. So, education.
So education
of the local municipals, right. And the indigenous people being the leads on, they're autonomous, the water committees being autonomous, and the water committees being involved in the municipal meetings, and them being the leads, not the NGOs, the indigenous people, the indigenous water committees. Yes, that have been trained over many years. And the key is training your water committees, and then their autonomy, and then how they build the relationships with the local municipals. And gestionar, what's gestionar? Gestionar is yeah, you have to push policy now.
It's a difficult question.
Yes, yeah. No perdas fe, don't lose faith. Yes. My dear, do you have your hand up? Or are you just fixing? Okay.
Oh, this session has to be
Okay,
soon.
okay. Any other quick question, or we're done? Okay, thanks so much for your participation. To learn more, you can just go to rainforestflow.org. And we're here at the end if anybody wants to hear anything else or understand it better.